Woo! Here we go. MSTR True North, episode 19. We are back. What a crazy couple of weeks. We're back after a 1 week hiatus. Most of us were at Bitcoin Investor Week this last week in New York City. I think we were very greatly missed last week. There's some pretty insane price action, a lot of volatility in the political market, a lot of uncertainty with what's going on, just generally in all markets. And, Bitcoin caught the volatility on both directions. We saw the price of Bitcoin go all the way down to I think 78,150. I know a lot of people sniped some cheap sats down there, and we ended up watching it go all the way back up to, what's it at right now? 92,000, something like that. And strategy followed along. we are here talking about the most volatile stock in the entire market, and we think the volatility is back. Obviously, since last time we came up here and talked, Strategy has purchased another $2 billion of Bitcoin, and I think we can jump into it. But first of all, we'll kick it over to Tim, not financial advice. Kick us off.
We're kicking it off, Jeff. What you're about to hear is probably going to be amazing, but it's not financial advice. It's for informational, educational, aspirational, inspirational, motivational, hopefully not demotivational purposes only. Back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so our agenda tonight, we're going to go through recent Bitcoin buys. We'll talk about the leverage update, get into Bitcoin Investor Week, talk about what's going on in the market outside of Strategy, just kind of get a pulse of the market. Tim, Dan, and myself were there. We can talk about what we've seen. We'll get into volatility. Dan will do a volatility update. We'll talk about Max Fear and just kind of what we've seen in the last couple of weeks. MSTY update with Soleil. We'll see if he's still getting his ass kicked or not. I know it's a little bit of a different strategy, but we'll get into it. FASB on the horizon. I've done a little bit of calculations. We can go through that. And then just a general discussion. A lot of people wanted us to discuss about, strategic Bitcoin reserve strategy, how they do their Bitcoin buys. I know a lot of people are frustrated with it. They could have caught the bottom or whatnot. We could talk about that. And then maybe if we've got any time, we can get into some questions at the end. And I would like to say we have a special guest tonight. Our special guest is Barry Bonds, aka Adrian Morris, with his brand new camera. He's looking like he's about to hit some homers, cranked up on steroids. So anyway, Ben will also join us a little bit later tonight, and we'll get into it. So without further ado, we'll jump into our weekly leverage update. And I will make my screen bigger. Share my screen. Go over here. There we go. Okay. So what we are looking at, this is just the leverage update. And I think this is one of the most important things to follow with Strategy, in my opinion, right? They're purchasing Bitcoin on leverage. They've got convertible debt and they've got preferred stock. It's really good to have an understanding of what is the asset valuation relative to the debt. Actually, I'll pause there. For those that are new here, MSTR True North, it's a group of people that gets together. We talk about the MSTR trade, Strategy trade. There's a lot of things going on in the market, and we're here to talk about what's going on weekly. So appreciate the time. All right, back to leverage. So Bitcoin held, Strategy holds 499,096 Bitcoin. RIP to the people that went long on will Strategy have 500,000 Bitcoin before March 1st on Polymarket. I think you lost that one.
Tragic.
Totally brutal. So Bitcoin price, $91,200 as of today. I think Mason, you said it's 91,800. But Bitcoin assets around 45 billion. Total liabilities, 8.5 billion. Liability to asset ratio being 18.7%. Assets, they have 5.3 times the amount of assets than they do liabilities. So you could say this is very conservative. In the last earnings call, Strategy even pointed out that their target leverage ratio is between 20 and 30%. So with this in mind, you could think that they have a bit more leverage that they would feel comfortable going up and increasing their leverage a little bit higher. Current MSTR price 308. I think that was as of aftermarket close. I think it's trading up in 316. So in order for Bitcoin or for Strategy's assets to be worth less than their liabilities, the price of Bitcoin needs to be $17,000 or lower. So I think there's a significant cushion here between the current price of Bitcoin, $92,000 ish, and what that number is between for the assets to fall lower than the liabilities. Even at that point, none of the debt that they have on their balance sheet is encumbered, right? It's not tied to any EBITDA constraints. There's no liquidation. There's no margin call. The price of Bitcoin would have to stay below that figure for an extended period of time, 4-6 years, getting to those debt expirations in order for that to even potentially start to become a problem if they needed to sell any Bitcoin down the road. So I think it's incredibly unlikely. Obviously black swans, but I know everybody on this screen and a lot of people in the chat would be selling their kidney and body parts and their cousins' children to buy more Bitcoin and put it in their own balance sheet. So a lot of exciting things on that horizon. Anybody else have anything to add on leverage here? No. Boom. Next topic, Bitcoin Investor Week. Okay, we'll stop sharing my screen. Stop sharing my screen here. Boom. Over to Tim. Tim, I want a minute and a half. Your takeaways on Bitcoin Investor Week and starting now.
I was going to ask if somebody can time me, but you're timing me. So that's
I got you.
All right. So here we go. There's going to be additional public companies, both nationally and internationally, adopting a Bitcoin treasury strategy from what conversations were during Investor Week. There are going to be private companies going public and putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Literally, I think he also came up to you, Jeff, or maybe Ben, one of maybe both, maybe all three of us, 4 of us, 5 of us, and said, hey, just want to introduce myself. I'm a private company. We're going to go flip public. We're going to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. So you got more public companies globally. You have private companies flipping public. You have more companies offering lending that are coming to market, and hopefully they'll be better than last cycle. And and the price was crashing during the conference, and like no one cared. No one was crying. Everybody was happy. Yeah.
People winced, and it's fair to wince, right? Like you see the price go down and it's like, oh shit, it's like, it's totally fair to wince, and people definitely wince, but people were buying, people were excited, people were there working on the future. Keep going.
Are we at 90 seconds?
20 more seconds.
And my last takeaway from Bitcoin Investor Week is it's worth it if you really enjoy getting to know people and like meeting these people. Like Eric Semler was like walking around just saying hi to everybody the entire conference, right? So like that's the level of like, it was pretty cool.
Anybody can walk up to anybody. Yeah, yep. Absolutely.
That's cool.
Yeah. Dan, over to you. 90 seconds.
Yeah, it was great to obviously touch base with all you guys. And I think it was great to be around people while the price was crashing. That was definitely a little tricky to navigate. And then furthermore, I thought there are a lot of people just excited and, a lot of professionals with a very long time horizon. And I think that separates the professionals from the retail, or those with a really, really long time horizon who have other sources of income and are using that to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. And so I think, a lot of us had a lot of deep conversations with the importance of Bitcoin in your own personal treasury reserve, in addition to MicroStrategy. So lots of good things there.
Awesome.
So yeah, you guys, that was nice to have a little support group, while the rest of us were suffering from crippling depression.
Yeah, the whole world. Yeah, the whole world was suffering, and we were just able to communicate to each other. It was like, yeah, are you buying right now? Are you buying? Yeah, we're buying.
Yeah. Price going over 300 today was like an antidepressant. Hitting my
Yeah,
bloodstream.
absolutely. I mean, everybody that feels absolutely really nice. I mean, when it went up to 300 and then back down to 250 and then back up to 300, it's just like, what is happening? You know, like Nvidia Mag 7's getting nuked. We got new tariffs coming in the door. It's just like, what is going on right now? It's totally crazy. Couple of my key takeaways from Bitcoin Investor Week. I'll try to time myself. Bitcoin has definitely hit mainstream. Traditional finance is on the scene. We've got big institutions that are showing up, coming to these types of events. Collateral was the name of the game. Collateral and lending. Almost all of the companies that are interested in, developing the Bitcoin ecosystem are interested in finding other ways to bring more fiat into the door to get more Bitcoin, and that's basically via lending or other products. 3, I'm pretty sure Anthony Pompliano is a robot. The dude sat up there for 7 hours a day, like 3 days in a row, just absolutely just fielding every single interview. And it was just totally insane. He had no paper, just went off the top of his head. Pretty sure he's a robot. A lot of people came up to us, and we had a really good crowd on Wednesday for our MSTR panel. It was really exciting. We went after a couple of lawyers, so they set the bar really low, and we came in and had some fun and talked about an exciting topic. And people clapped when we got on, and people wanted to talk to us afterwards, which was exciting and fun. And ultimately, I think one of the main things is a lot of people really still have no understanding of what's going on with MicroStrategy or strategy. And there is still so many things that people don't really understand with strategy. A lot of, some people came up or were asking about margin call. You can walk by people and they would be talking about strategy, but it just wasn't like a primary topic. Most of the people there were talking about lending or ETFs or other financial institutions in the door. And yeah, I think there's a lot more to come on the horizon. Some of the conversations I had with people, Bitwise, for example, they had their most productive and biggest month ever in selling the Bitcoin ETF in January of 2025. And the investor sentiment is that a lot of people were waiting for regulatory clarity from the SEC, political clarity from a new administration, having some open roadway to not shut these things down. So I think that's my main takeaways. I went 2 minutes. So Ben, do you have put you on the spot? Any takeaways? Minute and a half on Bitcoin Investor Week.
It was a lot of fun to be there. I mean, I was surprised by how many people came into town just to talk to us. I think that blew my mind. I think we, we're all doing this from our respective houses or basements or dungeons or wherever we're doing this from. And so sometimes you lose the fact of how many people are actually watching this all the time and like dedicating real time to watching us talk late in the evening for several hours and then traveling into a conference to talk to us. I mean, that was pretty incredible. So a huge thank you to everyone that came out. It really blew my mind. Outside of that, I like the small format of those types of conferences because you do get the chance to talk to way more people than you're ever going to be able to talk to at one of the giant conferences. I mean, most of the executives from all these companies, you've got all the guys running these ETF companies moving around, and you can just talk to anybody, and they're all more than happy to chat, which I thought was awesome. But, in terms of indications of what's happening in the market, there was a lot of energy around the treasury strategies out there. That was pretty surprising to me, the number of people that came up, whether they were from private companies, public companies. I mean, it ran the gamut. And the number of people that are at least thinking. I don't think a lot of them are far down the path yet, but they're at least thinking about how to integrate a Bitcoin treasury into their business. And I think that that's really interesting to see, particularly on a week where everything's nuking around us, right? I mean, it was a great week to be distracted because you just had everything going on with, Bitcoin crashing and MicroStrategy crashing, and we're volatility junkies, right? So, luckily we can ride that storm out, but it was it was a cool place to be while all that was happening, because you got no negativity coming from anybody there. And I was expecting that. I was expecting a lot of despair that week because of how many people, I'm sure, were feeling the financial pain of all those pullbacks and seeing what the other side of the volatility cycle does, and didn't really see that at all. So it was great. I mean, I left there very optimistic for what we're going to see this year. I think there's a lot of things in motion, and my hunch is the second half of this year, we're going to see a lot of new participants enter the market here, which will be really awesome.
Yeah, people are trying to figure out how to wrap Bitcoin into everything.
Everything.
I mean, I think this notion of collateral has really like exploded people's brains in the last like 8 months, 12 months. And people are like, oh my God, this is a whole new form of collateral that I could just throw into an existing product. So you can think of like mortgages, credit wrapped mortgages, private deals, right? Like everybody's trying to structure a deal and then throw Bitcoin on it. Because if that deal falls through, you still have the Bitcoin piece. You got the Bitcoin kicker, right? So now your collateral is at least worth something, and it's globally liquid, and you're going to get those dollars back immediately, right?
Yeah. I mean, the breadth of the types of people that were attending here was probably what blew my mind the most, because it was the first real event I'd been at where it felt like there was true crossover across all the TradFi participants. I mean, you had people there from Goldman. You obviously had all the private equity firms there, all the VC firms there. A ton of the investment banks were represented there, both bulge bracket, non-bulge bracket. I mean, there was just so many participants there to hear about Bitcoin treasuries. And I'm just talking about the first day. I'm not talking about the last day when, all the keynotes were out there. I'm just talking about the first day where it was just focused around Bitcoin treasuries and the number of banks that were there, because I think they've recognized that if this really catches traction, they want to be partners in this. And a part of that is they have to bring themselves through that education cycle of what is this? How does it work? Why does it work? Right? They understand all the structured finance components to it. That's what they do for a living. But they want to figure out, how do they become the best partner to these companies? Because it's good for business. I mean, if you believe in the trajectory of Bitcoin over the next decade, and you can really create yourself as a true partner for any of these firms that are coming out and trying to get this strategy up and running, you're creating a decades-long fee stream. If you're an investment bank, you want to participate in this. So just seeing the representation from all the different types of institutions, all the different types of investors, that was what really grabbed me. And the interest that they had, right? The questions that they were asking were really good questions, showing that they're actually thinking about this on a deeper level than I think they used to. And I think you got some pain as well when MicroStrategy took this last offering and went up to the bulge bracket investment banks. It left a void in the market. A lot of people and a lot of these smaller investment banks that were participating in the earlier converts, and they had customers that were getting these convertible bonds from them, lost it, right? They were out of the mix for this last round. Yeah, they might have felt good that week, but I think that it did leave a void where they're looking at how this market matures and where they're going to be able to fit, because you're going to have companies that are at all different stages of this, right? Not everyone's achieved the scale that a MicroStrategy's achieved. So MicroStrategy is going to capture the bulge bracket for now because their offering size just dictates it. But there's a lot of space for all these other banks to participate. And I think that's what they're trying to find, is what is the right segment of the market for them to participate in. And then if they can really build a business for themselves around this, they'll be great partners to get these things done fast and to get them structured correctly. So it made me very optimistic for where this is going to progress to. Broadly, outside of MicroStrategy, right? If I'm just looking at all the other entrants coming in the market.
Yeah, the entrants are coming in private, public, and the Microsoft proposal that we saw, right? We're going to see that proposal is going to get in the door on 25 other companies. We're going to see that other companies are going to have to consider a Bitcoin treasury strategy at various different sizes. I think the Zombie Zone that Semler has published or started publishing, some of those companies are great targets for running a Bitcoin treasury strategy that need a jolt to the balance sheet. And those are the type of people that were attending Bitcoin Investor Week. It was very TradFi. The last piece is it was also the political scale was very interesting. I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy did a virtual call on Friday morning, and I mean, he's fully orange pilled. The guy's going to run for governor of Ohio, probably win, maybe, but like Bitcoin is in his vernacular. Like this, he thinks in Bitcoin. He thinks in Bitcoin, and the company that he runs, Strive Investment Management, thinks of Bitcoin as the hurdle rate, right? Like these are the things that these people are starting to think about. I also shook Cynthia Lummis's hand at PubKey. That was crazy. That's a senator that's talking about a Bitcoin strategic Bitcoin reserve. I met with a couple of people that run the Bitcoin Policy Institute, and they're pushing forward in DC. They've got a whole crew in DC. There's going to be a PubKey that's getting set up in DC. Strategy is setting a new kind of like headquarters for Bitcoin startups to go work out of.
Yeah, it's almost like an incubator space, right?
There's going to be an incubator at Strategy's headquarters. There's going to be a new PubKey that's in between the White House and like in between the White House and what's it called? The Capitol. Yeah, it's in between the White House and the Capitol. And Bitcoin Policy Institute is getting basically the who's who of the entire industry down on March 11th to talk to all of the senators. It's going to be Saylor, a bunch of these big name folks that are going to be speaking to senators on March 11th. I think this is probably more important than this crypto summit that's coming up on the 7th on Friday, because it's going to be Bitcoin only, Bitcoin focused, and very tailored towards all of the senators. So there's a lot of action happening politically, financially, in many spheres, and people are working, right? Like people are working towards building the Bitcoin ecosystem and the Bitcoin economy, and they're making money. They've got a whole living. People are making a living working on this stuff, and they're going to keep doing it. So, yeah, crazy stuff. It
sounds like you're saying the trade's getting more crowded.
More crowded. I think it's going to get very crowded. Yeah. I think it's going to go much, much higher. And it could happen fast, right? I mean, who knows what comes out of this political administration from a strategic Bitcoin reserve perspective. I know a lot of people wanted us to talk about that, but I don't know any more information than anybody else does on the tweets that have been tweeted today. I think it might be an announcement on Friday, which would be great. I think it may need an act of Congress in order to pass through, but still some exciting things on the horizon politically.
Yeah, we'll find out whether his tweets, or whatever they call them over there on Truth Social, was if that was really the art of the deal, where you throw in all this other nonsense that you can cut out later, right? And be like, well, we tried, guys. We tried to get you in there, but we couldn't get consensus, because some of the stuff you throw in there, like you throw a Ripple in there, and that's when you just know that there's something going on, because that makes zero sense.
And
They're
Cardano.
basically going to use the United States to capitalize a private company. I mean, it's their capital slush fund. So there's just no way that you could deem that to be strategic, unless you believed that it was going to become like the central bank digital currency of some other nation, and for some reason you needed to have some of it. I don't know, right? But I can't wrap my head around why you could label that as a strategic asset. Bitcoin makes total sense. Total sense. After what happened with Russia, I think you would be naive to think that Bitcoin couldn't become a threat if the US didn't participate in it, a threat to the dollar. And as soon as you go and cut a country off from the SWIFT network, and you show that when you've got the dominant currency, you can throw your weight around and you can inflict serious pain on a nation, you have to reevaluate. And you have to look at what's the only asset that has the right amount of scale that I could use to maintain the sovereignty of my own country, and I can continue to settle trade with other partners in the event I can't transact in dollars. You have to be having that conversation if you're any country. And so Bitcoin makes total sense. All the other stuff, right? It feels like it's just a participation in a potential tokenized ecosystem of the future, right? I mean, if they end up tokenizing all these private companies' equity on a Coinbase or something, I don't know. Maybe there's some strategic reason to be participating in that. None that I can come up with yet. But really, when I think they work through this and they make all their arguments, the only one that everyone seems to agree with, including the guys running the exchanges, right? I saw Brian Armstrong come out and say, really, Bitcoin makes sense in a strategic reserve.
Peter
Tyler
Schiff.
Winklevoss
That
came
one
out,
shocked
said,
me.
yeah, Peter Schiff, Tyler Winklevoss came out and said Bitcoin only. I mean, so even the people who are basically running these, crypto casinos out there also think that Bitcoin should be the primary asset of the reserve or the only asset of the reserve. So we'll see how it plays out, but the market's reacting like it actually believes something might happen on Friday. So we'll see.
Yeah, not being annoyed with Peter Schiff felt weird.
That was
like,
hilarious.
what?
It's like he just needed something he could hate worse for a minute.
Yeah.
To be like, all right, guys, actually, now that
That's
I'm looking at all this other nonsense out here, Bitcoin's pretty good. All right. Like,
That's how bad shitcoins really are. Like,
yeah.
the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Well, there's a clip of Sailor circulating of an interview he did. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, where he has this huge grin on his face the whole time, as if he knows that something's on deck. And I'm not going to speculate as to what could be announced on Friday, because quite frankly, I don't know. But I think XRP, Cardano, and Solana being in a strategic reserve makes no fucking sense whatsoever. I don't know if those will become something in like a sovereign wealth fund, perhaps, if they really want to do it. But a strategic reserve, that just doesn't make sense to have
You
it.
have to separate the two for
Yeah,
sure.
you have
If you're going to do anything with any of the others, you've got to separate them.
Yeah, it just doesn't track. They're corporate entities. They're, as Ben said, they are essentially slush funds that the insiders used to pump and dump on retail. But let's not talk about that. So really, having something like that in a strategic reserve doesn't make sense. And also from a political standpoint, I would think it would be a non-starter, because once even putting those into a strategic reserve would require congressional approval, and then they're going to have to start drilling down into, well, what's the structure of these tokens? Bitcoin, you mine it, you own it. XRP, CEO. Cardano, CEO. Solana, CEO. Like, you just go down the list. They're corporate coins, essentially. So I don't know how that works politically, because that'll be America picking winners. And if we're picking winners, we might as well just go ahead and just have the entire Mag 7 in some kind of a sovereign wealth fund, throw in MicroStrategy, because why not? And then really start digging through which corporations we want to essentially, I don't want to say socialize, but in a way, if the United States government starts buying them and they start actually being shareholders of a company, that sets a precedent that I think is unheard of. So I just don't see how that's going to work. I think Bitcoin is the only one that's really going to be the one that has a chance, and I'm still more on the skeptical side because of the congressional approval piece. But if it's going to happen for any currency, it's going to be Bitcoin. It's not going to be for Solana. It's not going to be for XRP. It's not going to be for Cardano. It's certainly not going to be for Ethereum. Sorry. So I just don't see a strategic reserve for anything but Bitcoin.
Well, just look at all the times they've changed the economics around Ethereum, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
if you could do that, right?
Just,
if
just
you've
peel it
got an
back. Just roll
issuer-
it back. Just roll it back. Just roll
Oh, yeah,
back.
yeah,
But,
just roll it
that,
back, you know?
multi-billion-dollar theft. Yeah, there's
Yeah, sorry guys. The U.S. tried it on as a reserve asset. They didn't like it. We need to roll back to the day before. They did it. Like, come on, that's not going to happen. But if you look at having to get it through Congress, then you've got to ask yourself, what's the only one I can make a real argument for as being strategic to the country, right? And I think the only one you can, well, I know the only one you can do that for is Bitcoin.
Is Bitcoin.
It's the only one where you can make a clear case for why it would be strategic for the US to participate in that network proportionately to where they stand in the world today economically, right?
Well,
Just
and I
in
can't
the
believe
off
I'm the-
chance that everyone else starts going that way,
Yeah.
saying, hey, we see the risk with the dollar, we need to move on to something else. It's really the only choice at any real scale. So that one, you could see a good argument in Congress that hopefully even they can see, right? It's pretty clear.
They probably could have enough power to buy the other ones and then just slam them to zero.
they could,
But-
but so
Go ahead, Adrian.
yeah,
now
I
I'm
can't
changing my
believe I'm-
mind on those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not either. Yeah. I'm not
Whatever
Yeah.
gets them to
Well,
zero, I'm in,
Yeah. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but a lot of us have had this moment when he tweeted it. I'm agreeing with Peter Schiff. He said that Bitcoin is the digital gold analog, right? And he actually, it threw me when I read it. I thought he was hacked, honestly. But he essentially said, if you use the gold analogy, gold is mine, Bitcoin is mine. Bitcoin is digital gold. It is a better version of gold. It is a. I want to say it's easy a transition that they can make because we're dealing with politicians, but it is a natural transition to say you're going from, let's say we have a strategic reserve of gold. Now we would have a strategic reserve of digital gold. Bridging that gap is a lot easier than saying, so we've got Ethereum and we have the dank hashtag underscore whatever rollout that we're doing. And then Solana has Fire Dancer or Grave Dancer or whatever it's called. And then you have all these other nuances that go into all these coins because they're centralized. They're essentially controlled by insiders, and they are VC pump and dump tokens. I'm going to say it. I'm sorry if guys in the chat don't like it. Unfollow me if you don't like it. But it's the truth. And that's how they operate. They're cyclical pump and dump scams, 99.9999999% of them. They do not belong in a strategic reserve. I don't even know if they belong in a sovereign wealth fund. So until we bridge that gap and have some separation there, and there's some real adoption in terms of, is Solana going to be used to tokenize stocks, or is Ethereum going to be used to facilitate, ERC20 stable coins throughout the world? Are we going to have something like that? Until we have like a real use case that's going to be scaled, I don't see any reason why they should be in a sovereign wealth fund or strategic reserve.
If you think about the game theory here, the Dems have a really unique opportunity to just say Bitcoin only and take a strong stance. Will be interesting to see how it plays out. This whole conversation reminds me of that that clip where the guy he pretends to be on the phone with the IRS talking about his crypto trading. He's like, "Oh, so I was staked on the mommy DAO, and I got some good boy points." And it's like, try to explain that to Congress, dude. There's no way. Go ahead, Saleh.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's usually how politics works. You can just make the other party against something if you just say you're for it. But so yeah, it is a golden opportunity to separate themselves and just say Bitcoin only, and then suddenly a lot of people who are a one-issue voter, might flip.
Yeah,
I think Ben had the best tweet, which is eventually everything goes to zero against Bitcoin. So even if those shitcoins get in the reserve, like in some world that happens, it's all going to zero. And, having that low time preference, just makes it clear that even if there is some funny business, it doesn't matter in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's think about this, right? But Bitcoin's a $2 trillion asset. Let's say it triples and it goes to a $6 trillion asset. Do you know how many people are quitting their jobs to go work on Bitcoin? Like compared to all of the other shit coins, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of people. And that is what changes the game, right? Like is the energy of all of these people that are working to build a better system in a different way. And that's really the Trojan horse, right? Like if the strategic Bitcoin reserve happens from a political game theory standpoint and they start buying, it really is a Trojan horse to build out an entire new ecosystem and economy from a collateralized system. Yeah.
The one head fake I'm concerned of is that I don't want the focus to all of a sudden pivot from Bitcoin to stablecoins. Because if you look through a lot of the legislation for these state level reserves, a lot of it is stablecoin heavy. So I really want the focus selfishly to be on Bitcoin, because if the United States can become a nation state level holder, not just of the 200,000 that they have, but if they start buying and they start using it as a way to think about debt and structuring the economy in a different way, that benefits us. That benefits us all, even people that don't hold Bitcoin, right? But the stable coins and the altcoins and all those conversations, I think they should really be secondary. I do think stable coins have a future. I do think that they are going to be part of the economy, but I'm wary that they're going to use this as a way to flood the world with CBDC light and have US dollar dominance go through the roof again. So that's one of the things I'm trying to keep my eyes on.
Adrian, what do you think about the worry that stablecoins do kind of take over, and there's a fork that they would be able to have some influence on choosing the fork that might not be optimal for humanity and the rest
For
of us?
Bitcoin,
Yeah.
I don't see that as a likely outcome. I'm not going to say that's impossible, but here's why I don't think it's likely. So when the ETFs first came out, that was one of the things that they said, right? BlackRock's going to co-opt Bitcoin, they're going to fork it, they're going to do blah, 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 blah. What would be the benefit of doing that, right? First, the argument was, well, they're going to do it because of environmental concerns. Well, we see that BlackRock has slowly but surely been peeling back on all of those stances that they've taken with companies, right? With environmental concerns. And then we have the reality of what's the benefit of forking it from an economic standpoint? They're going to take this multi-trillion-dollar asset and then say, hey, we are going to change it. And then you just have to deal with it. Bitcoin by design, the network by design, that's not something that they can easily do, even if they get enough control over the network to do it, right? People are still going to want to have a choice of whether they use that new chain or not. And if we go back to Jeff's point about game theory, then what happens when you have other large players? So you have like the MicroStrategies of the world, you have other nation states perhaps saying, yeah, we're not going to do that. We have no interest in forking the network. We have the network is succinct and sound as it is. You're essentially breaking something that doesn't need to be broken, right? So I think that anyone, even if at some point in the future that gets to the point where they can have that much control or influence, to say that they're going to fork Bitcoin and go to proof of stake or what I don't see it happening. There would be no benefit to it. There's a multi-billion-dollar mining infrastructure behind Bitcoin right now, which eventually one day is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure. Then you have all the points that Jeff and Ben and Dan and Tim were talking about with regards to lending. And then you also have collateralized lending. You have all of these things going to be built on top of Bitcoin. And then someone is going to say at a later date, when the market is 10 times the size, we're going to fork the network.
Yeah,
I don't.
That's not going to happen. Yeah.
That's not going to happen, because then more than game theory, more than network security, more than hash rate, more than all of the things that make Bitcoin secure, the big thing that comes in there is greed. You're going to undercut a multi-trillion-dollar network and a multi-trillion-dollar industry to fork it to push an agenda that essentially one cadre of people or one group of people is going to try to push forward. I don't think that's going to work.
Cool.
Yeah, and you've got like what Tether's got 90,000 Bitcoin.
Yep.
BlackRock's got
Strategy's probably going to add 500,000 to a million.
BlackRock's got 1 million. Let's just say Strategy
Yeah.
gets to 1 million. The U.S. government gets to 4 million. I mean, you're still looking at what, like 10% maybe there. And then you've got
Then
to
you have all the log coins, so you got to take those off the table. So it makes the coins that we have more rare.
Yeah, tricky.
Yeah, and
I
that
don't
doesn't
see that-
bother
I
me
just
too
don't
much
see that.
as long as we stick with, kind of close to the 80-20 rule. Isn't that always how it works out? Like 20% of the population is going to have 80% of the Bitcoin. So if it got like 90-10, that might start to worry me a little bit.
Yeah, but it's not just about. So there are a lot of factors that come into play with that. So let's say BlackRock wants to fork it. I'm not even sure that they can, because they'll be fundamentally changing the product and changing the structure of a product that people bought. They would probably need to have consent from all the holders, and then they would need to have some kind of a. I don't even know what that would require from an organizational standpoint. They can't just arbitrarily say we're going to fork the network, right? And then you have to roll out the
Let's
network.
just say like the block size wars. If that happened again, or if BlackRock and Tether had as much Bitcoin as they do now, back when that happened, could it have worked out differently?
Well, so the block size, I remember the block size war. So the block size war is a different scenario because, again, I keep coming back to the size of the network. What Bitcoin is now in 2025 is very, very different than what it was in 2016 and 2017. A block size war now would likely get killed in the cradle before it even started. So, and again, this is just my opinion. The reason why the block size war happened is because you had individuals that were self-interested trying to push an agenda, that had a voice in the Bitcoin community, that had influence in the Bitcoin community, and then they were trying to push a change in Bitcoin's fundamental structure. So this is not something like, and I'm using this example just as an example. Let's say that they wanted to update Bitcoin to become quantum secure, right? That's an update to the network. Forking the network, and so even that, while it would require a fork of the network potentially, forking the network to make it more secure versus forking the network to change the way it functions are two very, very different things. And you would have many, many large players in the network that have a vested interest in that not happening. So we have too many players now. Before it was a lot of it was smaller players, it was guys playing futures, and it was whales. But now we have whales like BlackRock, we have MicroStrategy, we have potential nation states, we have it being talked about potentially in Congress at a later date. Like there's too many things, and there are too many heavy players now, and there are too many large peers in the network, if you want to use that nomenclature, for that to happen. That would require unilateral agreement, and people can't even agree on what shade of what shade of blue the sky is. So I don't see that being a likely outcome. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's improbable.
Cool.
Earth is flat.
There you go.
All right.
That's the only conspiracy theory I don't believe. All of the rest of them are true.
I don't know. Earth could be flat. I don't know. Okay, let's switch gears. Thanks for the perspective there. I think that's that. I mean, I feel like that conversation needs a whole round of beers for everybody, and we need to be 10 hours deep in another conversation. Let's shift gears over to Dan. Let's talk about volatility. We've got the price of the stock is moving. It's been moving up and down, both directions, sideways. It's a total roller coaster. So let's get some updates from you, Dan. It looks like you're sharing your screen.
Yeah. Second. Let me log in here.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, I'm just logging in.
Oh, no. we won't show your password.
It's okay. It's blocked out. Okay,
There
I'm
you go.
good.
Okay.
I know the
Bingo.
sounds of the keystrokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is just I don't have implied volatility on here, but maybe this is helpful for people to visualize what the volatilities are like over time. So blue is the 10-day volatility trailing, green is the 20-day, yellow the 60-day, and red the 100-day. You can see what's happened in the past week, right? You can see February 18th, we're sitting around 40 vol. And
That was right before they issued the convertible debt.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're up to 1.3 on the trailing 10-day vol, and everything's kind of ticking up. That happened pretty quickly here. So I think this is something we haven't really seen the likes of yet. Like this kind of spike in volatility, even when MSTR is at a significantly lower market cap, like that, this is not familiar for us. So I don't know what to make of that, what to think of that. If you want to look at MSTX, you can look at the volatility here as well. It's ticking up per usual, and about twice the volatility of MSTR, up to about 2.5. Same with MSTU. So, I mean, I always assumed as the market cap grew, the volatility would decrease, but that's not something that at least we've seen happening in the near term history.
Yeah, volatility is increasing as the market cap is getting larger, and now they're putting on more leverage. We've got almost a 19% leverage ratio going into a potential period where the price of Bitcoin can be even more volatile, both to the upside and to the downside. Interesting. Ben, any thoughts on IV? I know you look at IV. Soleil, I know you look at IV when you guys are looking at options trading. What's going on in your heads? What are you thinking about it?
it was great to see it spike up again. I mean, everything had gotten kind of flat. MicroStrategy had gotten really delevered. And I think that while a lot of people were a little disheartened by the $2 billion raise, because it got out of the realm where we were so used to them just upsizing every offering that they brought to market. I mean, 2 billion is a big offering to bring to market for convertibles. And so seeing them get slightly more leveraged, obviously, if they're at 19 is what you said they're at right now.
Yeah.
19. Yeah. So they're still a little bit below their target range. They want to be 20 to 30 is what they messaged out in their deck. So they're getting back there. The excitement's coming back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin had basically flattened for a while. I mean, what was the volatility? Did it drop below 50 for a while? I think it was at like 47 or something. I'd have to look back at the Volmex one, but it's good to see that coming back into the market, and I think that's going to reignite some interest. I posted today about MSTY and looking at some of those positions because it shows you what can happen if that price moves against you really fast. I mean, they were short a ton of calls from like 270 to 290, and then they rolled them. And I think they rolled them to like 317. And right now in after hours, we're already at 315.90. I mean, this thing's moving quick. And when you're selling covered calls, they're going to have to roll those things fast. So that's one of the ones I'm going to start watching some of their daily trades to see what their rolling activity looks like here as the IV spikes. And we'll see if this continues throughout the week, but they're going to be moving quick over there, and they're going to have to be. Because they've had a few trades that they lost on. If you look back 2 days ago, they had a couple intraday trades that they lost on pretty good as well. So it's wreaking some havoc, but it's making it really interesting to watch because we are seeing such a sharp reversal in that volatility. I think everyone had gotten lulled to sleep because there was just nothing going on. Everyone except Josh, right? I mean, Josh was having a great time, and he could not have played this any better. I mean, credit where credit's due, right? I mean, that guy played this all the way down, and now I think he's out of all of his short positions as of today or yesterday? I can't remember exactly when, but he's out of all his short positions. And so now I'm sure everyone's going to be watching for, when's Josh going to lever up long and, really go for it the other direction? Or is he just going to sit on the cash and wait to exercise some of those lower strikes that he's got? So we're at that period where people are going to have to decide whether they think this move is real or not, or whether we're getting whipsawed again. And I think people are going to be a little nervous to make a declaration either direction on this one because of what we saw with that initial Trump pump, right? I mean, pumped, slammed the whole, we finally got a $10,000 candle, and then we retraced a $10,000 candle in a day. I mean, that was brutal. That was so brutal. And now we're going the other direction. So people have got to be nervous on this one, but I'm feeling much better about it right now. I mean, I don't tend to ride a ton of leverage most of the time. Some people, while everything had pulled back, started asking questions about, how I kind of break things down. And I always tell everyone that Bitcoin is hands down my largest position. It's not even close, right? Bitcoin's the thing that is foundational to this entire process. So just holding Bitcoin, physical Bitcoin, is my number one spot that I keep my investments in. Everything else revolves as a percentage of that. So MicroStrategy, when I'm going pretty heavy, I'll maybe get to like 30% of what my Bitcoin balance is in MicroStrategy, and then about half of that will be leverage. It's typically how I play it because yes, it does have an outsized impact in your portfolio, just the way that it moves. And then when you're playing it all with options and you're watching these things swing, it has an outsized impact in the day-to-day moves of your portfolio. But the foundation of the portfolio is so strong that when we get weeks like last week, you don't feel like you're getting killed, right? You know that you've got this rock solid foundation that you're building on top of that you just never adjust away from. Bitcoin to me is a one directional accumulation right now. I'm not trading Bitcoin. I'm just accumulating it. And I make sure that every time we reach a new all-time high, I've got more of it than we had the last time. That's as deep as the strategy on Bitcoin goes for me. I think that is the most foundational element in a portfolio right now. It's what I'd consider the most sure one directional bet in my mind.
Right. Yeah. There is
when
no.
you-
It is the risk off asset, right? Like
it is.
Yeah, you've got counterparty risk. I mean, with strategy, they are leveraged Bitcoin equity, right? Like,
Well,
they've
you're
got-
seeing the counterparty risk with Semler right now.
yeah,
Right? I don't know if you guys talked about that at all before I got on here, but that shows some of the risks that come into play. And so I'll never be 100% one corporate equity ever. No way. Because there's things I can't control about the core business, and there's things within the core business that I can't possibly understand. So when things pop up, I wouldn't see them coming. So I can't sleep at night if I'm that concentrated just into a single equity, because there's things outside of a Bitcoin strategy that can go wrong. And with Semler, that was the DOJ probe into, whatever. I haven't gone deep down the rabbit hole on exactly what's going on, something with United Health and inflating. So I don't know.
Claims
I'm
or
not gonna speak to it because I've not gone deep enough there, but it's enough that it tells me to sit on the sideline for now. Right. So I had a bunch of Semler and I moved off to the sidelines now because I don't want that uncertainty in my portfolio, because it's a risk to the LB strategy when you have things like that. So you like to see pretty clean operating companies if you're going to go heavy in betting, and MicroStrategy is pretty clean. I mean, it's a BI business. You don't have obviously the same hurdles to jump through that you have with anything healthcare related, even if you're on the fringe of it. But it shows, it's just an example of what you have to be aware of when you're trading in equities in this space, is that there are risks with companies, and the risks that you can't necessarily see. Whereas with Bitcoin, I don't have a lot of that. There's probably not a DOJ probe that's popping up around Bitcoin, right?
No.
It's a commodity. We've gotten some clarity around that. That's calm. It's easy. That's the rock of the portfolio. And then I'll make concentrated bets in some of these other names, as I see the conditions show up. So you do have to manage your position sizing. You have to manage your leverage positions. I mean, chasing the home runs is almost the sure way to start back at zero. I mean, it's just how it works, because you always, when you get into options, you can be down 80% so fast that you basically feel like you're at a position where all you can do is pray that it comes back. Right. Like you
Yeah.
feel
Can
hopeless at
confirm.
that point where you're just going to ride it to zero. Yeah. So you don't want that to be a big piece of your portfolio. I mean, you've got to manage your risks from that perspective, because having to rebuild is a tough thing to do. So you want to make sure that you always keep yourself in a strong position. And the reason that I'm so concentrated in Bitcoin is a lot can go wrong in my equities portfolio. And if I believe in the trajectory of Bitcoin right now, Bitcoin can do all the heavy lifting to get me back.
doesn't matter. Yeah.
So that's how I've approached it. Doesn't mean that I loved what was going on. I had the good fortune of catching Palantir at the right time and having that offset most of the carnage in my portfolio, because I was short on Palantir. So that really saved me. But it never feels good. That's an uncomfortable drop. It's one of those things where we finally got down to 300 and everyone felt like, all right, this has got to be it. And that's when it's just going to twist that knife one more time and make you really question what you're doing here. But luckily it was short-lived, and we're bouncing back the other direction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you don't feel that way about Bitcoin, then the strategy trade doesn't even make sense.
No.
So you have to have that base.
Yeah, it's like foundational.
Jeff, can I share that chart that I sent you?
Yeah. Why don't you bring it up? And I mean, while Mason's bringing that up, you can be directionally right on an equity, right? And if you take an option bet, you can get the timing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And
You better always give yourself twice the time you think you need for whatever move you're planning, right?
Yeah,
At
for
least.
sure.
Because
You
it's
get the-
never going to go according to plan.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many variables that are uncontrollable and out of your control, right? Like political environment, like we've seen with these tariffs, right? Like the announcement of the tariffs nuked the market, right? Like, I mean, that probably wasn't on people's trading radar. So it's just something to be aware of. That's really important with sizing as well. If you're taking options positions, sizing is important. Thinking about timing risk is important, and you've got to be willing to take the time to pay attention to it, like Josh does. I mean, Josh is sitting at the screen eating cheese balls, watching the market. he has a very thorough understanding of what's going on. But go ahead, Mason. Let's take a look
Well,
at it.
first off, someone in the chat thought Ben was long Palantir. That's incorrect, right, Ben?
Yeah, I was very short Palantir. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know retail mania when I see it. I've been involved in it enough times
Yeah.
to know when something stops making sense. And luckily, I was correct on that one. It could have gone the other way.
Yeah. Anyways, no, I think this chart's just helpful for perspective of the past 2 years since 2023 to see kind of the growth that has occurred and the extreme volatility and pullbacks that have occurred as well. And, even though this pullback was very extreme, and I know a lot of people got into MicroStrategy or strategy on the rip up. So for many of them, it was even more painful. This is not out of character fundamentally. And this is something that Saylor has talked about, volatility is vitality. And it's also just something that I think, investors need to be aware of and have some context. So I made this little chart last week, and I updated it today. I initially made it when we were down 55%, and I think the low was 57. This is not exact, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, it's helpful, right? I mean, you compare it to the drawdowns that you see in Bitcoin, right? We see typically 30% drawdowns in Bitcoin in a bull market. And Mason, you're just pointing out what strategy moves at 1.5 to 1.75x Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Which that's to be expected. If you're long this equity, you can expect those volatile movements in both directions. And if you're a skilled trader and you're watching this kind of stuff, you might be able to catch it on both sides as potential.
Yeah.
What
Well,
I
one
like
thing with
about that chart-
volatility.
Go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say one thing with volatility that a lot of people that are diving into options really do need to consider is people tend to jump into options when things are already moving and they start getting that excitement about it and think they're going to ride it up. But really the time you want to be buying options is when the volatility is low. Because if you buy them when the volatility is low, the price can go down, but the volatility can go up and your options positions can stay largely flat at that point. Whereas Jeff made a comment a little bit ago that you can be directionally correct on options and still lose. If you buy your options when the volatility is really high, price can keep going up, but it can keep going up slower. That volatility can come down and you can lose value on your options. So you have to keep yourself out of getting too excited during the major pumps and wanting to jump into the leveraged products because you can get IV crushed in those, even if you're directionally correct, right? It's just not a good trade to be in when the volatility is already high. That's the reason why all the covered call sellers show up when the volatility is really high, right? It becomes the better risk reward trade. So, just be aware that if you are looking at options and you're someone that's thinking about investing in options, you have to become really disciplined about it and figure out what the right conditions are on whatever the equity is that you're watching to make sure that you're getting in at the right moments where volatility can help you way more than it can hurt you.
Bingo.
Yeah, that's a good point. And going back to what you said about, give yourself twice as much time as you think you'll need. You also have to realize that may not even be possible, because we had the historic January expiration where, so many people were in the money, but those people had purchased their options a year and a half, 2 years prior to that. And it was at the bottom of the bear market. And so they were, they were buying when the blood was in the streets, and they were rewarded for that. So if you come in and, a year later and you're like, well, it took them 18 months, so I'll give myself 18 months. But it doesn't matter, because now you've missed the entire bear market and you're halfway through the bull market. So you may not be able to even find a deep out of the money strike that ever gets in the money. Now there are other strikes that you might be able to select, or you just have to tell yourself that you'll exit that trade at a certain amount of profit, but thinking that you can just emulate someone else's trade by waiting as long as they waited, it might not work out because half that trade might already be gone. So you can't just, we say don't copy trade, but you can't necessarily, because you if you're 18 months late to the trade, it's not the same trade anymore.
No. And people also need to get really comfortable with taking profits on options
For
fast.
sure.
Because I can't tell you how many 200, 300% wins I've round tripped, and it happened in like a day. Right. So now I've just got it where anytime I get up 100% on something, I just take the cost basis out of it immediately. Right. Because I know how fast those can turn against me. So you have to get really rigid about the way that you start taking profits, or at least protecting the principal that you put into these, because one bad day can change everything if you're heavy options in your portfolio. And I've had that pain too many times now.
Yeah.
I also
A-
think
a
people need to. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple lessons learned that I've had, because I started out as an option seller, and then after Quant Bros 1, I was like, oh, let's buy some long calls. This looks fun. And November happened, and all of those positions were up, right? They were just fantastic, every single one of them. And now they're not. All of those winners are now losers just a couple months later. And so what I kind of realized was that when you're buying calls, you have to choose an exit. And if you don't, one will be chosen for you because it has an expiration date.
Yep.
If you want to hold spot and, diamond hands it like you do your Bitcoin stack, that's perfectly fine. And you can come back in 5 years and see what your strategy's worth. Or you can come
Infinite
back
call
in 10
option.
years.
Infinite
Exactly.
time call option on the assets.
There's no expiration date on spot. But if you buy a call, you have the timer starts ticking immediately, and you have to pick an exit position, or the expiration date will choose that exit position for you. And if it's out of the money, then you get no money. That's just how it is.
We're still in a bull market, guys.
Yeah, and what I was going to say about real quick, and then sorry, Adrian, but going back to Mason's chart, that thing, like, we had November, right? We had the same 4x move that we had in March, right? We had a 4x move in March. We had basically about a 4x move in from September to November, while the ATM was happening, while the company was deleveraging. The leverage ratio was going down. So if we pump again while Strategy's relevering and issuing more bonds and increasing the leverage ratio, that just makes me insanely bullish. Like, I'm starting to FOMO even just thinking about it.
And when you start to look at this huge list of, this is the full 2025 list for high T, BTC, and MSTR events. I mean, it's obviously really small on the screen here. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. But there's clearly a ton of things on the horizon related to Bitcoin and MSTR. We've got mining conferences. We've got GameStop earnings. Obviously, some big things happening at the White House. MSCI rebalance, FOMC meeting, NASDAQ 100, S&P 500 quarterly rebalance. Strategy's got their earnings call somewhere here in May. We've got huge conferences happening in May. Yeah, a lot of things on the horizon. And a shout out MSTR 21M for posting this. So a lot of things going on. And yeah, exciting stuff. Cool. So people want an update. Are you getting your ass kicked? What's it look like? MSTY v Soleil. Give us an update.
Yeah, the rally helped me out a bit, but I'm still down 10 grand. So I put in 215 in 2 accounts, and the MSTY account is down from 215 to 179 MSTY, and my account is down to 169. So the difference is basically every dollar of premium that I have collected in that account I've been plowing into the July 1080s, and those are probably down. They're down 25%, but they were down like 50% before this rally. So if we get to 350, then I'll be able to make up that 10 grand pretty easily. And if we get any type of return to 500 a share plus, then I should be fine.
Right. You've got a strategy to peel that off, right? I mean, to
Oh
Ben's
yeah,
point earlier, you got to have your strategy dialed in and set ready to go, right?
exactly. I'll
Um,
be watching the implied volatility charts, and if we get any type of spike whatsoever, I'll be peeling those off for profit.
Excellent. And so when you're looking at that, are you looking at what is Strategy's market cap? Like, where do I think Bitcoin is go? Like, do you have a Bitcoin target and then a strategy price target, an MNAV function of that? Are you thinking that far, or are you purely trading on IV metrics? What's or catalysts on the horizon? What's your kind of strategy from that perspective?
Yeah, so I started the account out with my version of a 60-40 portfolio. So I had 60% of my portfolio in shares, and then the other 40% was in the money leaps that I can sell covered calls against. And I generally just sell approximately a 0.2 to 0.3 delta against the poor man's covered calls. Now there's a formula for it. And then against shares, I'm free to sell at the money calls if I want, if I don't want any upside whatsoever. Or I can still sell 45-day expirations, maybe at like 80% chance to hit, which means 1 out of 5, 20% of the time, those would actually go in the money and become losers. So yeah, I don't really follow the Bitcoin's price, strategy's price, no technical analysis, none of it. If the price of strategy goes down, then my options go down, so I will just roll the strikes down for a credit and load up on more July 1080s. That was basically it.
Got it. Interesting. All right. Well, we'll continue to see how it's going. We'll keep our fingers crossed for you. I mean, you're directionally longer. I think you're longer than MSTY.
Oh, for sure.
Because you've got that long leverage in there, especially out in the tail. So you can get some really, if you have a big move in the underlying stock, you're going to see the tail options move quickly. Somebody asked, I think it was Dana asked, what what happens if it doesn't hit 1080 by July? What then? They expire worthless.
Yeah, by July. But the deal is, there's a little bit of a hack to make sure that none of your options expire worthless. Don't ever let them expire.
Yeah.
So my long calls will never go under 90 days to expiration. So the Julys I would need to roll in April, right? If I can't sell them for profit, then I'll take my lumps and I'll roll them out to August, September, October, whatever, and I can roll to the 1080s out there. I think I have 36 of the Julys in that trading account, and so if they're only worth like half when I roll them out, then I would only be able to buy 18 60 days longer duration, but at least I don't have to expose myself to the possibility of them going to zero value.
Right. Because as you get closer, the time value starts to kick in and they decay much quicker as they get closer to expiration. So that's the theta
Exactly.
decay. Right. So you have the ability to push them out longer and still take that same directional bet. It's just a bit further out.
Exactly. And I'm my expectations is that I would never let those even go in the money.
Right.
Because if we get a pump to 500 a share, 750 a share in the next 2 to 4 weeks,
digit,
I'll be able to sell those things for 2x, 5x profits, and I don't care if the price ever gets to 1080.
Yeah, but it's that base effect, right? You've got a small base. It's that like leverage effect. Small base on a small portion of your portfolio. If you see the vol move quickly, you can exit that position just on that multiplication of a small base.
Yep, and especially those will definitely benefit from Vega because strategy is very sensitive to changes in implied vol. So when we get an implied vol spike, not only will the direction of strategy's price positively affect those options, but the increase in implied vol will factor in as well.
Yeah, right. Got it. Okay, excellent. All right, we'll switch gears. Last thing I've got, FASB fair value accounting. So, Strategy will adopt FASB fair value accounting for Q1. We think that will be announced in May. As of right now, they would have a negative earnings per share for Q1, just based on the price of Bitcoin, around $92,000. So that would technically be negative. A lot of people have, sky is falling if they have a negative Q1, but it would seem like nothing actually has changed from the past accounting rules, because all of the past accounting, the past quarters of the last quarters have resulted in negative earnings per share as a result of the counting. So the number and the target that I'm looking at, I believe the price of Bitcoin needs to be above $96,400 ish in order to wipe out the last 3 quarters of negative earnings, which is about 1.1 billion of negative net income from the prior 3 quarters. So taking into consideration the purchases that they've had in Q1 so far, the position that those purchases are in, and the relative gain from any historical Bitcoin purchased, I think the target is, we're looking at March 31st, the price of Bitcoin around 96,400. So all eyes on that. I think it will be an interesting thing to follow. So at that point, at that moment, strategy is technically hits all of the requirements for entering the S&P 500. To put this into scale, there's about, I want to say it's like $400 billion of assets under management that follow QQQ. Strategy was added to QQQ in November, December. We saw a significant pump in the stock. Strategy raised $17 billion in like 40 days and via the ATM. Now, if you look at S&P 500 and just the general scale, the S&P 500 is 10 times the assets under management than QQQ. So it's about $4 trillion in assets under management. Those are the SPY ETFs and all of the mutual funds that follow the S&P 500. So, I think in terms of scale of dollar volume that could come in the door from the S&P 500, this is the golden goose, right? Like, this is the strategy getting included in the S&P 500 is a really big deal and a really big topic. And I think it could result in, $5 to $10 billion of inflows into strategy, and just from those passive ETFs. So something to keep an eye on. And there's a reason I've been following it for the last 260 days, because it is a really big topic, and companies generally don't get included in the S&P 500 index with market caps this high. Generally, when companies are included in the S&P 500, it's on the lower end, around $14 billion, $15 billion. Now, when companies get included with really high market caps, it is very controversial, because there's a bunch of money that's coming in the door. Because they are market cap weighted index funds. Just something to be aware of. Cool. All right. Last thing is just really discussion. We're at an hour 15. Maybe we'll do 15 minutes, just discussion, take some questions. We'll, see what people have to say in the chat, and we'll kind of go from there. Does that work? Dan, Tim, anything you guys want to add? Mason?
I saw a question from the chat, and I'm curious to hear from you guys too. And it's completely speculative, but what are the odds that GameStop adopts a Bitcoin treasury, and if so, when?
I think they're talking about it. It's definitely a conversation. We've I think there was some rumbling at Bitcoin Investor Week, now that I remember this, about conversations happening at the board level. I'm not sure how much voting power Ryan Cohen has. So I don't know if anybody can look that up quickly, but I think he's got to go convince some people he's got to do it. I don't think he's in a sailor position where he can, make a decision and just smash by $5 billion of Bitcoin. I think it would need to get approved. But I don't know if you saw Walker's post the other day. It was a proposal of what GameStop could do with a Bitcoin strategy, right? They could be the Bitcoin ATM. They could start selling Bitcoin merch in all of their locations. You've got a Bitcoin ATM there. It's almost like a gathering point for all these computer geeks to come together and talk about Bitcoin and do whatever they're doing. So interesting topic. It's possible. Tim, you might have some thoughts on that.
I don't know if I have any thoughts on it.
Probabilities, possibilities.
Yeah, what's Polymarket say on
Polymarket adding Bitcoin to GameStop balance sheet? I mean, that would be a crazy story arc for GameStop. It would be incredible to see, right? Because previously with the GameStop frenzy, it's like, what are you actually holding here? One of the things that I struggled with the trade was, wait, is this company worth $30 billion? What how do I value the company? What is the company worth? And it's just hard to conceptualize. Now, if you stick this asset, this nuclear core of Bitcoin on the balance sheet, that becomes a very compelling story really quickly. They would be the second largest publicly traded corporate holder of Bitcoin at that point too. I think, if they buy $5 billion worth, they'd be, was that 60,000 Bitcoin, something like that?
I think it makes all the sense in the world. I think Cohen owns somewhere sub 9%
There
of
we
the
go.
overall voting rights, I think.
We got Grok.
Yeah, there you go.
8 to 10.
Yeah, so somewhere around there. I thought it was below 9. So he can't just unilaterally make that decision. But part of it kind of, like, I've always wondered, because retail really rallied around GameStop. But the reality is GameStop crushed retail.
Yeah,
Right.
totally.
That was a lesson in what true dilution looks like, right? They did crush retail. There's no way around it. You had this rally going. Shorts were just getting killed, and they essentially bailed them out by issuing all these shares. Yeah, they raised a bunch of capital with it, but now they've got to go and reinvent themselves to figure out what to do with it. But you look at that activity in a silo, right? And nothing happens in a silo. But if I look at that in a silo and I go, Bitcoin is nightmare fuel for shorts. Nightmare fuel. If they went and just converted all that cash they're sitting on into Bitcoin, that is a short's worst nightmare. You do not want that. So part of me wonders if there is some resistance around it. Obviously, he's putting out these signals, so you do wonder if that's one of those games that these executives will play to start to try to get the public support around an idea that he can then use to go and pitch to the board and show the support in the market for going this direction, right? There's always gameplay that happens, right? Nothing's black and white. So part of me wonders if he's in that phase where he's basically out here trying to get noise to get kicked up around it, right? If he wants people to get really loud about the idea of them adopting a Bitcoin treasury. And if they don't have really good concrete plans for how they're going to deploy that capital and reinvent that company, this is a no-brainer. They should absolutely do it. I cannot see a reason not. If all you're going to do is park it in cash and just sit on it while you try to figure out what you're going to be when you grow up, I think that just sitting on it in Bitcoin would be a no-brainer, right? I mean, inject the growth of the Bitcoin network into your balance sheet at least while you wait to figure out what you're going to be. And on the other side, it makes people really have to question their positions in GameStop if you're short GameStop, because, well, you might look at GameStop, the entity, and go, well, this thing's not going anywhere. They haven't meaningfully reinvented themselves. There's really no excitement on the equity right now. If you've got $4 billion of Bitcoin and Bitcoin starts running like crazy, all of a sudden you got a problem now, right? Because that's going to trickle into the equity and that's going to cause a lot of pain for a lot of people. So part of me thinks Ryan probably does really want to do it, but he needs to generate the support to get it done. And, when you're posting pictures with Saylor and you trim down the accounts that you're following on X and you basically follow, what, doesn't he follow like 2 accounts or something, and it's
Yeah, it's like
Bitcoin
Bitcoin
and something else.
Magazine. And
Yeah, yeah. So
GameStop.
he's clearly signaling out, but now it's time to show whether they're serious about this or not, or whether this is, just a entertainment venue for them at the moment.
Strategy announced that they were going to buy Bitcoin for the first time, right? And gave shareholders an out.
they
They
did.
did.
They did.
Did
the Dutch auction.
so but GameStop doesn't have to do that? Could they just secretly buy and then announce, or would they have to do something similar to that?
I think they could buy. I don't think they would have to go the same route, because it's not necessarily for them a total change in strategy, right? Yeah, it's a change in how you're allocating your cash, right? How you're holding your treasury reserves. But if they're not planning to go like the leveraged route and do what Strategy's doing, if all they were going to do is go convert that $4 billion of cash into Bitcoin, that I don't think has quite the same impact as if you're messaging out to the market that you're completely changing the direction of the company, which is what Strategy did, or MicroStrategy at the time. So I don't think it has the same requirements. Well, it wasn't even a requirement on MicroStrategy's part. It's just basically the right thing to do as a company when you totally change and you're basically turning over your entire shareholder base. I don't think this would turn over GameStop shareholder base one bit.
No, that'd be,
Not one bit.
they'd be fired up.
Yeah.
And is it
Quite frankly, it's going to bring a lot of people in.
Yeah. Everybody would be fired up. I mean, I'd be fired up. Fuck yeah.
Oh, I'd be in for sure.
Yeah. It'd just be.
Yeah, I was I'm trying real hard not to buy some long positions. Just on a
Yeah, I'm
coin
not
flip.
buying anything just because I've had to change my mindset into once you show me you're serious, then I'll participate.
Right.
But if you're playing the messaging games and the secrets and all, like, until you do something with it and prove you're actually going to do it, there's going to be too many of these to get
Also-
involved in everyone who whispers they might think about Bitcoin.
Yeah. Here's the reality. If they do it, this entire group is going to hear about it first. We're going to beat the rest of the world, right? Like you don't have to beat the rest of the world plus us. Like like the whole world doesn't. Like people don't even know there's a company that's holding $50 billion worth of Bitcoin, right? Like the world doesn't know this is happening. It's just like everybody's asleep at the wheel.
Speaking of Jeff, quick question for you. How do you feel? Any reflections or thoughts on today? I don't know if this is accurate, but I'm pretty sure it is. In the comments, today's the 1-year anniversary of Quant Bros episode 1.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can MSTR hit 10,000, which is a stock price of 1,000 today, which I thought it was going to be maybe a 4-year horizon, something like that can get to that 10,000 figure. In fact, Ryan actually didn't let me title the episode "Can MSTR hit 100,000?" So that was my original thought for the episode title. He's like, dude, people are gonna think you're crazy. You can't do that. Like, let's put a little more of a reasonable target there. But yeah, no, it's a lot has happened in the last year. I definitely feel a lot more comfortable in my life with things that are going on. Feel comfortable on the screen. Feel super glad I met you guys. Got a whole crew that's following along what's going on here. I mean, I'm in a whole new headspace, working in the Bitcoin ecosystem and trying to think about future opportunities here, and got out of the reinsurance rat race. So yeah, the reflection is I'm super grateful. Just really happy to be here. A lot of exciting, positive things going on.
Did you even have in the back of your mind that you might not be in that same job at this time next year?
Oh, absolutely. Every time I got an airplane, I pulled out my calculator, and like while I was taking off and landing, I'd be like, how much fucking money am I going to make?
That's such dangerous math to start
It
doing.
is.
You check
It's
out
just
so
like,
fast.
All right, if Bitcoin does this and this does this, and it's like all of a sudden, I just wasted 45 minutes on a calculator. I probably looked like the crazy guy whoever I was sitting next to was like, this guy's nuts. Like he's just sitting on here just calculating numbers on a phone calculator.
At least they were big numbers.
They were big. I'm like, fuck. And I'm just trying to back into like multi-trillion-dollar companies. I'm like, what's the share price?
Yeah, but Jeff was probably always on there adding one extra zero just in case someone was watching him, so it looked super impressive when he was adding up.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, the thesis still holds, right? Like, and I posted that a couple of days ago. My thesis is really simple. Like, I think this is going to be the strongest financial company of all time that the world's ever seen, and they're so far ahead compared to any other company in the market. It's just like it seems impossible for any other company to catch them. Honestly, if the U.S. government tries to catch them, that will just be a crazy race to see too. Right? I mean, go out and try to buy $50 billion worth of Bitcoin right now. What's the price going to do? It's going to go to the moon.
And that's why I was asking, did they have to announce it? Because if they really tip their hat, then they're going to get screwed trying to buy. Because people are going to front run that, I would assume.
Well, the U.S. government.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still on the GameStop.
Or GameStop.
thing.
I mean, yeah, even, but people front run strategy every time they buy. Right? Everybody's front running everybody all the time, right? Like if you really want to front run all these people, everybody's just buying now. So it's like you almost like game theory the thing into like the start, right? Like you go all the way around and then you come back to the start. It was like, well, if I want to front run everybody, I just buy it today.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no. The last thing I'll say is I think when strategy does get to the top of the publicly traded leaderboard, I think it's going to be in my mind, it will be one of the only valuations that I can rationalize, like financial strength of a company holding Bitcoin and, whatever that may be. Whereas you look at like the Mag 7 right now and you just like people made up some ratios, price to earnings, and like that's people just accept it. Like that's what the company's worth is like a 30x P ratio and you're trading 10 years into the future. I don't know. I feel like a lot of traditional finance is just doing a bunch of shit because they've done it that way for 30 years and everybody's asleep at the wheel, and passive investing has just exploded. And there's a lot of irrational valuations out there, really high.
Jeff, can you pull up the chart that I just screen shared?
Yeah.
So you brought up MicroStrategy being at the top of the leaderboard, and Apple's at the top of the leaderboard. So right now we're at MicroStrategy. We're at around an $80 billion market cap, which in Apple terms, it represents Apple in 2007. This is pre-iPhone launch. iPhone was launched in
2008.
June 2007. I looked it up today.
Okay.
I was 5 years old.
I got one in like July of 2007. I was like, this is sick. It was so slow.
It was also a brick.
It was huge, it was thick.
Although I'll tell you, I still do miss some of the Nokia phones. Those things were indestructible. I mean, they were basically weapons.
You could jump in a pool with it and like come out. It's like, it's waterproof too.
Or the Nextel phones, you could obnoxiously chirp people's phones.
Yeah.
Good old days, guys.
Yeah.
I think I have a Nokia in a box in the attic or a junk drawer somewhere.
Does it still have Snake on it? Because it might be worth something.
Snake check.
Fire that thing back up.
Anyways,
it's like, all right, well, I don't know.
I guess Mason's got to pull us all back in line.
I'm not done with my point. I was listening to a Sailor video today.
It's like, what is Snake?
Yeah, I was listening to a Sailor video today. It's the one where he's like, I've invested in a lot of tech stocks. I've made a lot of money from them. And then he's talking about how ridiculous it is to trade Apple at $2 a share to like $3 a share. Right. Yeah. Shaking the guy. And he talked about when, this might be a separate video, but when Apple came out with the iPhone, everyone thought it was a toy. And this kind of resonated with me because the first iPhone I ever saw, do you guys remember that beer drinking app?
Oh yeah.
Right. And that was, that was kind of the gimmick.
It was revolutionary.
Yeah, it was revolutionary. But at the time, people thought it was a toy, and it kind of just reminds me of how Bitcoin is viewed right now. Of people, might be familiar with it. It's like, oh, it's the iPhone, or oh, it's Bitcoin, but they don't really understand the larger implications. And I was just thinking today about the volatility. If you pair this with the other chart I showed earlier of the extreme volatility, essentially MicroStrategy and Bitcoin, Saylor says Bitcoin's a way bigger opportunity than Apple or any of these tech stocks, ever were in his view. MicroStrategy and Bitcoin independently is going to go to 10 trillion, and then 100 trillion, and then 200 trillion. And MicroStrategy is going to be dragged along the way. It's going to go to 1 trillion. It's going to go to 2 trillion. And the drop from 2 trillion to 1 trillion is going to hurt a lot. But you're going, you should hold. And then it's going to go to 4 trillion. And then I believe it'll go to 10 trillion. And, we'll see what the fiat system looks like then. But what I'm trying to get at here is, if this volatility, if you're not having fun right now, if you're not embracing the volatility, if you're not seeing this as a huge buying opportunity, then step away for 10 years, step away for 20 years, right? And I'm kind of just advocating, if this is causing stress in your life, but you truly believe it, you're allowed to step away. You're allowed to totally tune out. And you don't have to do options. You don't have to do any of this shit. In fact, Saylor's like shaking you, like, why are you trading options? Some of us enjoy it. Some people, most of us probably shouldn't, right? Yeah. That's probably the reality.
But buying the stock is an infinite call option. You have no time.
Infinite call option. But I think in times like these, when we're at the bottom of the volatility, or maybe we're not, who knows? You have to zoom out, and you have to start making analogies like, okay, we're at an $80 billion market cap. What does that mean? What does that really mean? Where is this going? And see the opportunity before you, because if you don't, you'll just get lost in the turmoil of this market, of this world, and of yourself, of your own emotions.
Yeah. While you're showing this $80 billion market cap, the largest company at that time was ExxonMobil at 450 billion, right? Oil represented the most valuable companies in the world in, the 2000 to 2010s. From 2010 and forward, it moved into tech and big data. 2020 forward, now we're getting into this like AI world. And I think digital capital deserves a spot up in that kind of AI data tech world. But just to put that into perspective, right? The largest company was 450 billion in 2007, and now the largest company is 3.5 trillion, which is Apple. So a lot of that is global monetary expansion, and different stores of value, right? People going from different commodities, from oil into other tech stocks, the development and expansion of passive index investing, all of those different things. But so, I mean, there's so many takeaways there, right, Mason? But you're right. I think we are still incredibly early. A lot of people still think Bitcoin is a pet rock or as tulips, and have never done an on-chain Bitcoin transaction, or don't understand. They don't even know that strategy exists, right? Most people don't know, like, these companies. There's a reason I post all of the companies every day, because you start to realize how many, $80 to $100 billion companies you don't even know exist, right? And like, the only reason we all know about strategy is because we're like super bullish on Bitcoin. It's incredibly exciting, but this won't even hit mainstream vernacular until strategy, hits $1 trillion market cap. Even then, I think people largely won't even know that it exists.
Yeah, ask people about NVIDIA, right? Like, most people don't know what that is.
Yeah, or they may know it, but ask them what they do.
Yeah,
ask what NVIDIA does. And I honestly couldn't really tell you what NVIDIA does. I'm just like, holy shit, this company's worth $3 trillion. They do AI stuff. I'm like, wow, that just kind of came out of nowhere. Wish I would have.
And it's only been like a little bit more. The past 3 years, right? It's come into even the investing world mainstream consensus. I I'd definitely heard of it before, but it's become this story with the AI narrative. And yeah, we're incredibly early.
It's early. It's really early. And
Well,
people
Tim
are
went and sent a
people are
wire
work-
transfer, right? Tim, do you understand the value of Bitcoin? Would that have been a lot easier?
It would have been so much easier. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, on the topics of game theory, going to Jeff and how early we are and how fast moving things are. And I might jump around here a little bit, but of course, for a long-term strategic Bitcoin reserve, we're going to need an act of Congress. Everybody, I think we're on the same page. But you have these multiple different buckets, and we don't have time to get into announcements about the 50 states and what's going on and what bills are coming in and out and failing and going sideways. But I was on a pod, it's coming out tomorrow, with the guy from the Texas Blockchain Council, and the bill did pass the Senate today, and they're expecting it to pass and into law over the next 30 days. So, if you're punter Jeff and you can bing, bing, bing the game theory of one state actually doing it, what happens with the other 49 states? And then on the national level, whether it's through an executive order and then Congress or just Congress or whatever this is going to be, what does that then do with China and Russia and on and on and on? The game theory of the states and the sovereigns, it could just get pretty wild. And that's where, to the 7,000 comments in the chat tonight, yes, we could be at $1 million Bitcoin by the end of this year. Maybe it'll take 10 years. We don't know. That's just my personal opinion. And we're all entitled to our opinion.
Well, you're in good company, Tim, because I saw Samson Mao getting interviewed recently, and he said the same thing.
Well, he's a mega bull. I'm a mega bull. But then you have CZ. I don't know if that's still a name or not. But
Binance.
you have quite a few people saying, "Hey, some of these things are in play." So.
Well, what'd CZ say? He said 800,000. He's like, Bitcoin should be at 800,000 right now. I think he's like, I'm just confused. Even,
Trust nothing CZ says.
yeah, even Josh Mandel is like, I don't know. He thinks Bitcoin is what's he say?
400,000.
He's like 400,000. He's like, it's worth 400,000. It's just trading at 100,000, or that. I don't know. He's a time traveler, I think. Trading on.
Well, he supposedly was a market maker, but I think he still is.
He
on the
is.
down low.
He for sure
He
is.
covered all of his frickin' positions, and it immediately rallied today.
Oh yeah,
The market we live in, he's a market maker for sure.
he's for sure. He's the last of a dying breed, right? Like, he's trading against computers, and he's like, there are very few people like him, and it's going to be hard to beat the computers much longer. Yeah. Crazy.
Well, interestingly, in a few weeks, I'm going to go talk to one of the Michigan House of Representatives about their bill that they've got going through right now. It's got all kinds of crazy stuff in it. They want to launch a coin backed by gold and silver and then introduce a reserve. But we're going in to just talk to them about Bitcoin and narrowing that focus down. So I'll be curious to hear what that conversation is here in Michigan. But we'll
Enough
see.
with the shit coining, guys. Like, just focus up here.
yeah. Like, maybe we just narrow this in a little bit.
Yeah, there are some creative ideas. I'll repost when this pod comes out tomorrow, but in Texas, they actually inserted language so that any kind of unclaimed property would or donations would be put into Bitcoin, something like that, to kind of at least get something going. And then basically at the last minute, they had to pull out that part of it to ensure, because they had so much support. Like, it was a unanimous yes vote out of the committee, which they were not expecting. So like, some of this stuff on the state level, I think, can be kind of fast and furious. And if you're not like in the room or talking to someone directly involved, you wouldn't know any of this stuff. So again, at the national level, I'm not trying to, say, oh, this is going to happen tomorrow. But on some of the state level and with some of these other organizations, it could be a little bit of a surprise to the upside as far as just how dynamic and fluid these things can be.
Yeah, and they may see, you know, like if a state passes this legislation and maybe they're a little bit more favorable on crypto legislation in general, like you could see business development there. Business development brings tax dollars, right? That brings influx in population, which helps the economy. You know, right? Like there's that kind of downstream impact, and all of a sudden you see these other states start to potentially lose population. People flooding to these different locations, et cetera, et cetera. Their economy's boosted, whatever. And that's kind of what incentivizes that game theory to intensify. And I mean, a lot of things happen at the state level first too, right? I think women's right to vote, I think, started as like a state issue in Wyoming and started getting taken over by wildfire, and a bunch of states approved it, and then it ended up becoming federally women were allowed to vote. Even marijuana, it started in a state, and now 50% of the states have legalized marijuana. I wouldn't be surprised if federally it's legal in the future. I mean, a lot of things start at the state level and then kind of expand and go fast, broad to the federal level. Yeah, exciting times, man. Exciting times.
I think it's going to be a big year. And I think people are going to figure out exactly how easy the Bitcoin trade is.
Yeah.
Right, to understand. I mean, if you just look at the US dollar and you understand that they have to have this constant focus on price controls all the time. If you're trying to control the price, something else has to give, right? And that tends to be the supply that has to give to control the price. So if you want to take the exact opposite of that, right? If that outcome is a near certainty that they're going to have to adjust the supply to keep the prices down or the debt load down or whatever it may be, then you want to look for the one thing that exists that has the fixed supply, where the only thing that can give is the price. And that's Bitcoin. And I think people will find that out sooner rather than later. Obviously, everyone who watches this has probably understood that a long time ago. But for the people that are still holding and saving in US dollars, it becomes a very easy mindset shift when you realize that's as simple as the trade is. If you believe that they're going to have to continually keep inflation out there, which they tell you, right? We target 2 to 3%. Doesn't mean they achieve it. Sometimes it's much worse than that. But if they're really doing well at their job, you're going to get 2 to 3% inflation. Well, then I want to own the one asset that's out there with a totally fixed supply. I'm going to take that side of the trade, and I'm going to park all my non-necessary capital. If I'm not paying credit card bills or whatever, it's sitting in Bitcoin, because that's a bet that I will take 7 out of 7 days a week.
Yep. Bingo. All right, we're hour 42 in. I think this is probably good to cut it off. It was plenty of chatter. And we'll be back next week. Ben's going to be on vacation, but we'll have a crew here. There's going to be, a dozen more things we could talk about. Obviously, we got a big day on Friday with the potential crypto strategic reserve. God, I can't believe I said that. Bitcoin's strategic reserve, hopefully, and the Bitcoin Policy Institute on March 11th. So we'll hopefully see what comes out of that as well. So appreciate the time. Thank you to everybody that showed up to Bitcoin Investor Week and said hi to us. Appreciate that. I mean, love meeting these people in person. And thank you everybody for the time. We've got 13,156 viewers here live, and it blows me away every single time. It's basically a stadium. So appreciate it. I think we're early. Don't be that uncle that sold Apple for 72 cents in 1985 and completely just missed the opportunity of a lifetime to change their life over the next 20 years. Anyway, that's my final thoughts, and we'll catch you all next week.